Chapter 8. Luther Brinkman shifted slightly on the couch, adjusting his leg, which was propped on the coffee table and resting on a pillow, and trying to find a comfortable position. "I told you it was too soon to get dressed," Callie said. "If you hadn't given me that shot while I was unconscious, I'd be fine," he retorted. "If I hadn't given you that shot, the wound would likely have gotten infected. Isn't my fault penicillin needs to go on the hip?" He ignored that question. "Look, we both know I need to get on my feet and mobile as soon as possible, especially after you found that blood." It was early afternoon, and Luther was more than a little disgruntled that he'd slept through the morning totally against his will, waking only when Callie had roused him for lunch. Already he was itching to be up and doing things, like his job. "I told you, the only blood test kit I have is unreliable. Even testing positive for human blood doesn't necessarily mean that's what it is. That's what it was because of the high percentage of false positives. Could have been animal blood, and even if it was human, it could easily have been from a hunter careless enough with his tools to hurt himself. It happens." Callie told herself that there was no sense in telling Luther what she was sure of, that the blood was indeed human and the person who had shed it beyond their help. She told herself it was for his own good, that he didn't need to be agitated more than he was, not when he was recovering from the wound, and not when there was nothing he could do about it anyway. She told herself all that, and she knew she wasn't being fair to him, or even just professional. He needed to know what she knew, but not now, not yet. "We need to know for sure, Callie, in case it has anything at all to do with Jacoby." "Yes. But it was more than half a mile from Jacoby's cabin, and he's shown no signs to date of venturing that far out." "Maybe he got curious about me." "Maybe, but if so, he wasn't tracking you. That blood was nowhere near the path you took going to his cabin, or the path I took getting you back down here after you were shot. Look, you said Caesar didn't pick up a trail from the point where you found blood. If it was just a hunter, wouldn't he have headed for town or for one of the cabins up here?" "Not necessarily. Hunters often camp up on the mountain, and some would consider it completely unnecessary to have a minor cut looked at by a doctor. Could be he realized he was bleeding and just went back to his camp to take care of it himself." Okay, now she'd gone beyond lying by omission. Now she was posing a possibility she knew very well hadn't happened. "So why didn't Caesar lead you in that direction?" "Because he knew it was there. Because he knew we couldn't help her, that no one could." Luther knew she didn't want to answer, and that was one of the reasons he was pressing the matter. That and a certain evasiveness he had heard in her voice when she had first told him about finding the blood. She was holding back, and he didn't like it. Granted, she barely knew him, and granted, she could be following orders, but damn it, they were both in this now, and he needed to know what she knew. Plus, he was feeling generally irritable because he was a grown man and not accustomed to needing help getting his damn pants on, a procedure made more annoying, for some reason, because she had been utterly matter-of-fact and efficient getting him into the borrowed jeans and flannel shirt while he was barely able to stand upright. After a long moment and a thoughtful stare, Callie said, "Caesar didn't want to go in any direction except back here. He made that very clear. Not up or down the mountain, and not toward Jacoby's cabin." "I gather that's unusual?" "First time he's done it here. At other times in other places, it was always his way of protecting either me or someone else, sensing something potentially bad and guiding us away from it. He wouldn't have had a reason to protect me. You were the one out there with the blood." "True enough." She went to top off her coffee, sent him an inquiring look, and then hung the pot back on its hook in the fireplace. She didn't sit down, but wandered rather aimlessly toward the kitchen and leaned against the counter, frowning. "What?" Luther asked. "I could feel it too," she said finally, "out there with Caesar, pushing at me. Like wind, but not. Pressure. I felt the edge of that darkness, that energy that I felt before around Jacoby's cabin." "Why does that surprise you?" Because, Kelly said, the last time I felt it, it was weaker, less defined, and it was much closer to Jacoby's cabin, a good 300 or even 400 yards closer. What? I can't be sure because my instincts as well as Caesar's were telling us to get back here and not stop to probe. But that feeling, that sensation of dark energy isn't something easily forgotten. It was the same thing. Stronger, darker, but the same thing. Then it's what? Expanding? Maybe. Or maybe he was close out there and we just couldn't see him. Maybe he carries it with him. Maybe he always did. Luther watched her, absently rubbing his wounded thigh. I have a strong hunch your background info on Jacoby is a lot more extensive than mine, especially when it comes to possible psychic abilities. Was he ever examined by anyone in the SCU before he escaped? Callie shook her head slowly. There was never a reason. The SCU generally doesn't deal with bank robbers. Until Jacoby escaped the way he did, there was no reported indication he might have a paranormal ability. He was given psych evals, right? Several times, as a juvenile and as an adult. This most recent robbery wasn't his first rodeo. He has quite the rap sheet. Starting with petty theft and boosting cars when he was around 12 and ending up eventually with both armed and unarmed robbery by his late teens. But no real sign of violence. His psych evaluations were pretty standard. Not a psychopath or a sociopath. Just on the antisocial end of the scale, like a lot of small-time criminals. He could make casual friends, he could hold down a job, he could talk to people with fair ease and even charm when he wanted, but most consider him a loner. Good with puzzles, with numbers, tested a bit above average in intelligence. He didn't come from an abusive background, but he was orphaned young thanks to a car accident that took both his parents. And since there were no other relatives located, he went into the system. Decent foster home from all accounts. He was in the same one until the judge got tired of making allowances for a poor orphan who couldn't stay out of trouble and sent him to a juvenile facility when he was 15. And he was on his way. Yeah, not so much rehabilitated as educated. He pulled his first successful major robbery not 6 months after he got out. Managed to stay ahead of the cops for a couple of years before they got their hands on him again. And that judge in that particular jurisdiction was dealing with homicides, gang wars, drug crimes. Wasn't much concerned by a young thief who hadn't used a gun in that particular robbery, and who promised with great sincerity to go straight. So, time served? Callie nodded. Time served. After that, he got more careful, and he got good at robbery, good at getting away with it. He got very good, and for years. Never did time again until they caught him after he pulled this last heist. Probably wouldn't have caught him then if he'd stuck to his usual type of robbery, netting himself a few $100,000 at most, and then laying low and living simply. But 10 million draws a lot of attention. Luther finished a lot of resources. Yeah, Bishop believes Jacoby had no idea that payrolls for several major corporations were sitting in that vault. From the tools he left behind, he was going after the lockboxes, which were supposed to be in a secondary vault, not one connected to the cash safe. He shouldn't have been able to get that safe open, and nobody's sure even now how he managed it. Maybe he had time to spare and was curious to try his skills. The alarm was down, though no one seems to be sure how he managed that, or how he disabled it in such a way as to avoid an automatic secondary alarm. No way to be sure, but once that safe was open with millions in cash just sitting there, who'd blame him for taking the easy route? Callie nodded again. He dumped his tools and presumably filled the bag that had held them. Everybody was surprised that he managed to break in alone, but there was never a shred of evidence to suggest he had an accomplice or that anyone on the inside helped. It was almost as if everything just fell into place for him. A glitch in the security system of the building itself that made access a lot easier than it should have been. A security guard who was supposed to be watching the monitors happened to be taking cold medicine and fell asleep. Or maybe was put to sleep, Luther offered. Callie nodded slowly. I hadn't thought, but maybe so. maybe even then he could do that much. The cold medicine could have made it easier, Luther said thoughtfully, unless the guard lied about that to cover his ass. Yeah, but either way, Jacoby got in with amazing ease. The disk storing the camera feeds was faulty and nobody knew until afterward. Even the vault lock itself was just days away from being upgraded because there was some kind of issue with the electronics of the locking mechanism. Just a whole string of glitches that helped Jacoby get in and out way too easily. Luther frowned. Does Bishop think Jacoby might have used some paranormal ability even then? I'm not sure what Bishop knew or suspected about the robbery. He didn't say, but looking back, it's certainly possible. At the time, the SCU wasn't called and knew nothing about it, which means we were never able to inspect the actual vault and safe or talk to employees when it might have mattered, right after with the secured crime scene. I think Bishop knew or suspected something before Jacoby was transferred months later, but, well, it's Bishop. Whatever he knew or suspected, he didn't say. Luther glanced absently toward Caesar, then said to Callie, maybe it's time to report in and talk to Bishop about the situation. I know there's no cell service here, but is there a service anywhere nearby? 500 yards higher up the mountain is a sweet spot where cell reception is crystal clear because of the tower on the next mountain to the north. There are a few spots like that one scattered around, but none are close, and the terrain is hellish. Luther realized he was looking at Caesar again, frowned, and returned his gaze to Callie. You're saying you'll have to hike up the mountain to make a call? No, actually, I don't need to do that. As I said, Bishop and Miranda are right on my frequency, so I can communicate with them telepathically and as clearly as I can talk to you here. Damn it, why didn't you tell me that sooner? Honest, she said, I wasn't ready to report in. You were okay. We were safe here, and I hadn't yet done my job. Still haven't. Luther sighed, but wasn't angry because he completely understood her attitude. It was typical of those who were accustomed to working alone, or virtually so. Are they close by? No. Bishop is outside Boston, and Miranda's in California. Distance doesn't seem to matter as long as I can focus. Luther, do you realize you keep looking at Caesar? Just realized, he admitted, then added slowly. Also just realized I'm feeling profoundly uneasy. That was when Caesar suddenly got up and they heard the frantic scratching at the cabin's door, outside. Cold Jacoby thought breakfast would make him feel better, and then he thought lunch would. Neither helped. But what really bothered him was that he had no memory of the time between breakfast and lunch. It was just blank. When he tried to remember, there was only a dark nothing. At first, realizing that, he was grateful at least that he didn't have blood on him. But then he realized that he was not wearing the same clothes he had dressed himself in that morning. He found those in the washtub with the other set he had stripped off that morning, soaking in reddish water that smelled strongly of bleach. He was almost afraid to look at the dogs, and when he did, he was surprised at first. Ace's bed was empty, Cleo's, Lucy's, but if they weren't in their beds... It nearly broke his heart when he found them huddled against the back door, all three trembling. And as he watched, Cleo began frantically scratching at the floor while the other two stared at him fearfully. They wanted nothing but to get away from him. You know, don't you, he murmured. You know what's happening. You know I'm not safe anymore. He could feel the darkness then, not just at the edge of his awareness, but creeping inward, like some smothering black sludge that would swallow everything in his path, even him, especially him. Cole didn't know how much time he had left, but he knew he had to use it to save the only beings in the world he'd ever truly loved. He went to the front door of the cabin and opened it wide, then stepped back. Here, he called to them, holding his voice steady and calm, with what he suspected was the last of his control. Let's go, guys, out. They hesitated for only a moment, and then all three scrambled for the door and out. This time, Jacoby gave them no command except one. He stood in the doorway and watched the dogs race away, calling after them in a voice that wasn't steady anymore. Stay away from me. Away. Find somebody to take care of you, and don't come back. Don't ever come back." Luther was startled by how fast Callie moved, setting her coffee cup down, getting her weapon from the table near the door, and then halting suddenly and for a long moment to look at Caesar. The Rottweiler, still on his feet, was looking at the door but didn't seem at all disturbed. He lifted his gaze to Callie, and if a dog designed by nature to look fearsome could look serene, he did. "Huh," Callie murmured. She kept her gun in her hand but didn't hesitate to open the cabin's door. They pushed it wider open, the 3 large dogs rushing inside so close together they nearly tangled in the doorway, and they would have run over Caesar if he hadn't backed up several quick steps. And they didn't stop until they had wedged themselves into the farthest corner of the main room of the cabin, beside the couch where Luther sat. All 3 were shaking visibly. "What the hell?" he said. "They're terrified." "Yeah, I can see that. You don't have to know much about dogs to see that, but terrified of what?" Callie looked outside for only a moment, then closed the door and returned her weapon to its accustomed place. She came over to where Luther was and sat down on the end of the coffee table near his prop foot, facing the dogs. She didn't say anything for a moment, just leaned forward with her elbows on her knees and hands linked loosely between them. "Hey, Cleo," she said quietly, "remember me?" All 3 of the dogs had been avoiding eye contact, but when Callie spoke, the largest of them finally looked at her and gradually stopped trembling. "The one you met out hiking?" Luther guessed, keeping his voice low and casual. "Yeah, her name's on her tag. I'm guessing the other 2 as well. It's okay, Cleo, it's okay now." Her voice was somehow infinitely reassuring, something even Luther felt. The dog took a step toward her, then another, and finally laid her head on Callie's knee. The other 2 dogs watched, their trembling finally easing as Callie stroked Cleo's head. "Think Jacoby drove them away?" Luther asked. "Maybe, or maybe they ran away. Because he was cruel?" Callie frowned and shook her head a little and said, "Wait." She continued to stroke Cleo, gradually working her way over the big dog until she completed a pretty thorough examination. By then, the other dogs had ventured closer, and she went through the same routine with each, calm and gentle, but thorough. By the time she was done, the dogs were relaxed, 2 of them lying on a rug near the fireplace, and the one male sitting at the end of the coffee table, having his ears gently rubbed by Callie. "This is Ace," she told Luther after examining the tag on the dog's collar. "The one beside Cleo is Lucy. I'm guessing they're litter mates, obviously mixed breeds, and I can't find a single sign that any one of them has ever been abused." "Could be verbal," he noted. But Callie was shaking her head. These dogs have been cared for, and I mean really cared for. They've been well-fed, well-groomed, and obviously socialized. Whatever terrified them, it didn't have anything to do with people. At least, nothing to do with how people have treated them in the past. Then what? Maybe the negative energy? Caesar was sensitive to it, if they are too, and they've been with Jacoby since he got here. Would negative energy affect dogs? I mean, negatively? No idea. Their brainwaves are different, so I'm guessing if there was an effect, it wouldn't be the same as with us. You said the dog, Cleo, acted friendly and normal when you and Caesar met her before. So what's happened since then? Callie finished slowly. What's different now? Just that energy that we know of. Stronger, darker. Maybe the dogs were okay as long as Jacoby was. As long as he was able to fight off whatever the negative effects have been. Like shooting at people. You said the dogs chased you for a bit and I heard them. When did he send them after you while he was still shooting? Thinking back, Luther said no. I managed to get at least 100 yards away before I heard the dogs barking. Now that I think about it, they didn't come very far after me. I think I remember a whistle. He must have called them back. Callie nodded. The hunter said he did that, whistled his dogs back before they were out of sight of the cabin. So he was just making a point. Probably. But my point is that the dogs were still obeying him then, still willing to return to him. I'd bet next year's pay they won't go anywhere near him now. You're basing that on the idea that the energy you sense is strong enough you believe to completely overpower him. I think it's a reasonable assumption. My only question still is whether the energy is centered around that cabin or around Jacoby. Until today, I was hoping it was the cabin, the area, because we could have gotten him away from it. Kelly nodded. But if it's centered around the cabin, and that's what I felt hundreds of yards away from the cabin, then it's way the hell too big to be anything we could deal with. So now I'm hoping Jacoby is at the center, that rather than find it here, he somehow brought it here with him and lost control. That fits his behavior. Okay at first, not social but not violent. Puts his fed handlers to sleep and escapes, takes his time, gets his beloved dogs, makes his way to the cabin he's made arrangements for earlier, the cabin he believes is safe, losing almost everyone trying to track him in the process, settling in, then the fairly rapid escalation, shooting at hunters, at you, and finally scaring off his own dogs. Everything changed, and in less than 2 weeks. Luther let that sink in for a few moments, then said, "Do you think he'll come after his dogs?" "No. I think he let them go or drove them off to save them from himself. And if I'm right about that, then some part of Cole Jacoby realized he was becoming dangerous, that there was something in him he could no longer control or couldn't control for much longer. And now it's got him. Probably. Negative energy. I know how it sounds, believe me, but I felt it, Luther. Some energy is just power, force, but some energy is more than that. I can't explain it. I don't know if anyone could, but I know what I felt." He waited, looking at her. Purpose. Strength contained and intensifying for a reason, building up to something. Whatever that energy is, wherever it came from, it has a purpose, an endgame, a goal. And I can guarantee you, we won't like whatever it wants to do. "Okay," he said finally. "In that case, I think we have 2 options. We call in major backup, or we get the hell out of here." He held up a hand when she would have spoken. "I know, your job was to figure out the energy, but I can't help you do that, and no offense, I don't think you can do it alone. Not if this stuff is as deadly as you feel it is. Shield or not, you may be even more vulnerable to the energy because you're a born psychic." "It's a point," she conceded, "though I've been able to deflect negative energy in the past. But you can't be sure about this negative energy, that you'd be able to do the same thing. Every energy has a unique signature, and this one could very easily be the one that could punch a hole through your shield or otherwise disable or hurt you." "It's possible," she agreed. Luther nodded. "The other point is a lot more positive. Jacoby has so far shown no signs of wanting to leave the area. Hunters have been warned to avoid him. The area is practically deserted otherwise, so we can be fairly certain no one else is in immediate danger. We can alert the sheriff down in Devil's Gap if you think we should, especially after finding that blood. But Jacoby's here, relatively contained, if only by the isolation and geography of this place. We have no reason to believe he's going to move out of the area, at least in the short term, so we have no reason to believe we'd be putting anyone else in danger by getting out of here until we can get some help. We need backup, Callie. At the very least, I say you contact Bishop and let him know what's going on." She chewed on her lower lip for a moment, then said, "Well, there is a danger in that. Up here, I can only reach out to contact Bishop if I drop my shields completely. You may not have noticed, but they've been up since this morning." He was a bit surprised that he hadn't noticed, and a bit worried about that, even though he reminded himself that he was new at this telepathic stuff. "I don't feel that energy now, here. Caesar doesn't feel it, and Jacoby's dogs are calm now, so they don't feel it either. That tells me that Jacoby isn't close, and or that the energy field around him isn't expanding. or hasn't expanded this far. She nodded. But if I drop my shields and reach out to Bishop, no matter how narrow my focus is, I'm not only opening myself up to attack, but sending out positive energy, and positive energy can attract negative energy. He'd know you were here. I'm pretty sure he already knows I'm here. What he may not know so far is that I'm here because of him and that I'm psychic. Not that I'm certain my shields have kept him out, especially since I haven't kept them up consistently while I've been here. But I think I would have known if that negativity touched my mind, and I think Jacoby simply hasn't been paying enough attention to consider who or what I am. Seriously. He's had a lot to deal with, remember? I bet he fought as hard as he could to maintain control and probably lost a few times for minutes or hours, until finally he lost it for good, which probably happened just about the time he got his dogs away from the cabin. What happened when he lost control? I don't know, but my guess is something bad. Negative energy needs something to feed off if it's going to grow more intense. The darkest energy comes from evil acts. I should tell him, I really should. That blood. No way to know for sure. I doubt Jacoby could have caught himself a hunter, and there aren't many other people up here. Usually hikers, but the weather's been colder this season, so that's less likely. But possible. He could have killed someone. Why does it seem so wrong to tell him the truth? Because I'm afraid he won't believe me if I tell him we can't help her now. That's a big leap to take from a few drops of blood we don't even know is human. Blood plus increased negative energy, I say, makes it less of a leap. Point, she conceded. If and when he lost control, he could have done almost anything. If the energy is taken or is about to take him over completely, then he's likely capable of evil acts, even if he isn't aware of committing them and doesn't remember them afterward. So you believe whatever personality made Jacoby who and what he was is gone. For good? I don't know. I'd probably know if I met him face to face, but given all the negative energy surrounding him, possibly controlling him, I'm considering that a last resort confrontation. Until we know what the ultimate agenda is, what's driving that negative energy, and whether it's feeding off Jacoby or is actually dictating his actions, I don't think we can be sure of much of anything. Luther nodded slowly. Okay, well, I made my suggestions. What are yours? Given just the possibilities we know of, pretty much the same. Starting with contacting Bishop, in spite of the risks. I'd rather risk it up here than get down to town first. I don't want to come down off this mountain without letting Bishop know what the situation is. The potential for danger to the public might be low, but that's been an assumption based on his past actions, not the current state of Jacoby's mind. Too many variables now for me even to make an educated guess about what level of threat he poses to the public and to us. At the very least, Bishop needs to know for sure that we're dealing with a hell of a lot more than a bank robber. Agreed. Anything I can do to help? To his surprise, Kelly nodded. She went over to a cabinet where she kept her first aid kit and carried it to the kitchen island. She had her back to Luther, and he was surprised again when she returned to sit again on the coffee table and hand him a syringe. There was a clear liquid inside. What the hell? Soberly, she said, I want you to watch Caesar. If you see him start to react in any negative way, give me that shot. Callie, if he growls, if the hair stands up along his spine, if he's staring at me as if I pose a threat, give me the shot. He'll react before the other dogs will because he knows me. Keep a close eye on me, boy. Yes, always. Luther looked at the syringe in his hand and once again felt a profound sense of unease. Is this a sedative? No. The last thing I want to do if that negative energy finds mine is go to sleep. That's leaving a door wide open for it to come in. Then what is this? Callie pushed up the loose sleeve of her sweater to expose her upper arm and pointed to a specific spot Just pop it in right here and hit the plunger full dose. Cali. It's a stimulant. It'll break the connection with Bishop, slam my shields back into place. Surprised, Luther said there's a med that'll do that. First I've ever heard of it. Experimental. The lab people have been testing it, and so far I'm one of the few showing a useful reaction. Uneasy, he said, are you sure it won't hurt you? I'm sure that negative energy could hurt me a lot more. I'm trusting you, Luther. If Caesar reacts, give me the shot. Listen, can't we talk about this? We already have. She closed her eyes. Watch Caesar. You'll know if something bad is happening. Are you sure? Cali was silent, and so Luther fixed his gaze on her attentive Rottweiler and hoped to hell nothing bad would happen. You know what to do, what you have to do. You understand, Luther, don't you? Luther. Something was growling. It sounded mean. It's very simple and easy. You've done it before during your tours of duty. Just one quick movement and it's done. Luther, listen to me. To me. Don't let her stop you. Stop us. We have to do this. You know we do. It feels right, doesn't it? All the strength, all the power surging through you, making you invincible. And it's all yours. You'll be able to do amazing things, Luther. You'll be able to do anything you want. Anything. Luther, you have to listen to me. Growling. What was growling? Luther, concentrate. Listen to me. Ignore everything else. No, don't listen to the bitch. She doesn't know you. She doesn't know us. Doesn't know what we're capable of. Do it, Luther. Kill her. Kill the bitch. Luther! He snapped out of it with something between a gasp and a grunt. His mind abruptly clear, that dark, dark voice gone, shoved out of him with the strength he hadn't known he possessed and wasn't even sure had been entirely his own. And found himself in another kind of nightmare. They were outside, in the woods. He had her pinned up against a tree, his greater size and weight holding her there. That and the big hunting knife he usually carried while in the outdoors pressed to her throat. A thin line of red showed that he had already cut her. Luther realized that in an instant. He also realized that she had her weapon in hand and that it was between them, snugged up just below his rib cage, pressing hard upward, inward, aimed at his heart. She could have killed him at any time. As he stumbled backward, he saw as well that her free hand was extended down and to her left, fingers wide in a holding gesture. Holding in place the exceptionally well-trained Rottweiler, standing about 3 feet from them. 120 pounds of straining, trembling muscle, desperate to leap to the defense of his mistress, Caesar kept his eyes fixed on Luther. And both the exposed and gleaming fangs and the deep guttural growl promised that if he was given the command or even the chance, he could and would tear the throat out of the man threatening Cali. Quietly, as though nothing had happened, she said, "It's okay, Caesar. Break. Sit." The Rottweiler stopped snarling and sat down, but he was still trembling visibly and never took his eyes off Luther. For his part, Luther took another stumbling step backward until he came up hard against another tree. He stared at the knife in his hand, then let it fall to the ground. "Jesus Christ," he muttered hoarsely. "What the hell happened?" Cali drew a deep breath and let it out slowly. "The dark energy got into you."